Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me today. My name is Danielle Corbett, and I work for the FAA in the Unmanned Aircraft Integration Office. I've been in aviation for over 20 years, and I spent 15 years flying professionally. For about the past 5 years, I've been working on UAS matters. So I've learned a lot about where the industry is going, where the regulations are going, and how it relates to the overall aviation system. Today, I'm going to talk to you about safety. I'm not going to give you a lot of facts and figures and get into detailed discussions about regulations. What I'd like to do is have a general discussion about what safety is and what safety means to aviation. If you look at the FAA's mission statement, it is to provide the safest, most efficient aerospace system in the world. But what does that mean? What does it really mean? Does it mean that there are never any accidents or incidents? Well, of course not, because we know that there are accidents every year and every week, really, in general aviation. So, what do we mean when we say safety? When it comes to being an aviator, safety means trust. Building the safest, most efficient aerospace system in the world means when people get on board an aircraft in the United States, they do not feel concerned about the system that they're operating in. So while they may be nervous sitting in the seat or get really uncomfortable when there's turbulence or just like flying, dislike flying in general, I would say that American people trust that the system is designed to get them where they want to go safely. Whether they get there on time may be a different matter, but they'll get there safely. And that is the trust that we have in the safest aerospace system in the world. Taking it one step further, if you walk outside your front door and you walk down the street with your children, you're confident and you trust that things are not going to fall out of the sky and hit you in the head. Airplanes are not going to just start falling down. They're not going to crash into your house, and little bits and pieces aren't going to fall down and land on your street. This is the trust that we mean. Trust that the planes and the pilots and the controllers and every part of the system are all operating to an acceptable standard. But oftentimes when we think about safety, we think about it in terms of absolution. We think about there being no issues, and we can never achieve that unless we stop flying altogether. So when I think about this word safety, I think it may not actually be the best word to use. And I hope I don't get fired for saying that because the FAA uses that term a lot. We say that safety is our first priority, and we mean that it is. But what we mean by that is that we're assessing the safety continuum. It's a continuum. It's not a black or white situation. I really like to call it the risk continuum so that we can see what we want to do and how we can do that without causing harm to ourselves or others or to our community or our equipment or property. So with this trust and with operating in the system, there's a large responsibility, and that responsibility falls on all of us. So what does that mean? It means that we have to learn what the aerospace system is and how we must operate in it. I'm going to take a non-aviation example. Just this weekend, my family and I went up to our barn. We just bought a barn up in the North Georgia mountains. And we're up there, and there's all these rock walls on the property. And they're really cool. They're all over the place. They're just rocks stacked on top of each other. And I have two young kids, and they love to climb on these rock walls. But I know that like snakes like to hide in places like that, and I'm afraid of snakes. And they might even be nesting in there, but I'm not sure. But I'm thinking about it as I'm watching my kids climb on these rock walls. And I think that the safest thing for me to do is to tell them not to go near those rock walls. Don't climb on those walls. But they love climbing on those walls. And while they're climbing on those walls, they're learning things about balance, about their personal limits, and they're gaining confidence in themselves. And I guess they could get a snake bite, in which case they'll learn about snakes. But I know that the reward of them learning incrementally and scaling up their safety continuum or their risk continuum is worth it. Of course, I don't want my children to get hurt, and I certainly don't want them to get bit by a snake. But I understand that those things are outweighed by them learning about snakes, by learning about nature, about how to climb walls, learning to trust themselves, and instilling in them the responsibility that they have for themselves and for each other when they're out there doing things that they have to assess those risks and hazards. Another way of saying this is, how often do you go flying? You're going to take a flight, or you're going to go fly yourself, and someone tells you to fly safe. Well, what does that mean? Obviously, I want to fly safe. I'm not going to go out there with the intent of flying recklessly. I don't want to kill myself or hurt myself or crash the plane or hurt anyone else. Safety is obviously the basic intention. I took an aircraft investigation course in Oklahoma City a few years ago, and the instructor said it a slightly different way. He said, telling a pilot to fly safe is like telling a pitcher to throw a strike. And I remember that. Pilots want to fly safe and pitchers want to throw strikes. But what do we mean when we say that? What is the meaning behind it? What are we saying? Well, it takes me back again to my children. And I promise this will be the last time I mention them. And this is not a dissertation on parenting. But I was reading this book and it's called The Last Child in the Woods. And the author was talking about when you're watching your children playing and they're doing something and your insides are getting nervous, you have to say to them, instead of be careful, tell them to pay attention. And I think this is really sound advice. And I think this is the best advice I can give, that to be safe means to assess the situation around you and what you're operating in, and assess your personal limits and the limits of your situation. And of course, the limits of the rules that you're operating under. So in terms of aviation, I would say that some of us have different minimums. Like we only fly in certain weather, we have certain weather minimums. And when we're doing approaches, we may only come down to a certain altitude based on the weather or based on our personal limitations that are more conservative than the rules. And it's really no different when it comes to drones. You have to fly within your personal constraints in addition to the rules. So if you have no experience, let's say with a piece of equipment, you should incrementally learn how to use it. First, take it out of the box and read the manual, then turn it on and see how it works, learn about its features, then take it out and learn how to take it off and how to land it, and then slowly see how take it further and faster and higher. And learn how to hover and how to operate the camera while you're flying and all these things. There's so much to pay attention to. And there's an infinite number of distractions and variables, especially when it comes to flying at low altitudes like we do with drones. There's power lines, there's people trying to talk to us, there's people walking around. Our aircraft is relatively small, so it's sometimes hard to see. Not to mention that there's other aircraft flying around, and it's not just helicopters and ag planes that fly low. There's air carriers, there's student pilots that might be flying low, there's parachutes and hang gliders and ultralights and kites. It's a very busy and complex space. So paying attention is really the best thing that you can do. Think about what you're going to do before you do it. Think about the scenarios that you might get in and what you'll do to respond to them. We call this challenge response sometimes. Think through what you would do in any given situation and how you can continue flying safely and how you can navigate and recognize hazards and risks. Another way of saying this might be, and I say this a little tongue in cheek, fly, crash, repeat. And I am certainly not advocating that you go out and try to crash your drone. But what I'm saying is, if you try something and it doesn't work out, learn from that experience and do it differently next time. Learn how to do it each time. We get better. Teach others what you've learned. And it's hard with drones because they're kind of sometimes considered toys, even though they're definitely not. They are an aircraft. They are not a toy, but they're advertised this way. And they're also advertised as plug and play, something that you could just buy off the shelf and go fly it without a whole lot of training. And I've got to tell you, that's not exactly true. And I do have some experience with this. A few years ago, I decided I wanted to get into remote control flying. So I went out to the store and I bought myself one of those yellow little foam Piper Cubs, and I was so excited to fly it, I could barely wait. So I got home, I put my kids to sleep. I'm sorry I did mention them again. And they came downstairs and I opened the box and I took it right out of the box and I fired it right up and the prop started spinning. I get so excited, I couldn't wait. So I went outside and I took it into the backyard and I tried to fire it up and fly it. And I had no idea what to expect. I had never flown one of these before. I had never seen one flown. I didn't read the manual. I didn't go on YouTube. I didn't ask a friend. I didn't join a model club. I just went into the yard to take it off. This was before I worked for the FAA, by the way. And I immediately lost control of it. I didn't even get off the ground. It hit a tree and it broke. I broke the wing. So I spent the rest of that night repairing the broken wing and learning a little bit more about model aircraft and how to fly them. And I watched a video and I kind of saw some people doing it and I thought it looked pretty easy. So the next day I went out to the soccer field and I'm like, we're going to fly this thing. It's going to be awesome. And I got it to take off. I launched it with my hand and I got it to fly around and I'm turning left and I'm turning right. And then all of a sudden it starts seeming to not react to what I'm doing. It's kind of like playing a video game and you're not sure if you put the 25 cents in, if you're playing or the computer's playing, and it starts to circle. And I remember the guy who sold me the thing told me that there was a safety feature in it that, you know, if you get out of control or you needed a little break, that you can enter into this mode and it would just start circling in a pattern. And that's exactly what it did. It did what it was supposed to do, but I didn't mean to put it in that mode. I didn't even know how I put it in that mode. And I certainly didn't know how to get it out. And so it started doing the circling as advised, but the circle started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And before you know it, bam, right into a tree. Very tall tree that I did eventually get it out, but that aircraft was never again airworthy or recognizable for that matter. But that's another story. But we see this a lot with drones too. They come with all these features and they're marketed as safety features, and they are, and they can be. We have things like geofencing, return to home, return to land, and things like that. And if you know what you're doing, they can keep you out of trouble. But if you don't know what you're doing, they can get you into trouble. We see this with student pilots. They get into a plane for the very first time, not knowing what they're doing, and they go from 0 to 10 or 20 hours, and now they're flying in the pattern by themselves. And they haven't yet learned things like how to navigate, how to find other airports, or how to communicate effectively. They know the basics. They don't know how to fly an instrument approach. All they know how to do basically is fly in the pattern, but we do this because we're teaching them incrementally. We're building confidence and putting things in context so that they can take those skills to the next level. You can't just jump right in. It's incremental. You have to scale up. You have to scale up your competencies. And similarly, the FAA has to scale up our regulations. This is, still kind of a new industry. And I hate when people say that because it's new, but it's not new. It's been around for a while and we're kind of in it. But it is moving fast and regulations move slow. But when you think about it, just 5 years ago, the FAA didn't have any regulations. We had some very complex, very bureaucratic ways of flying legally in the airspace. But now we do have some basic regulations. And those regulations let us do a lot of what we really want to do, like take pictures or do drone racing or gather the news or do crime fighting even. But at the end of the day, there is further that we have to go. We have to get to beyond visual line of sight. We have to get to operations over people. We have to get to super long distance critical infrastructure inspections, package deliveries, urban air mobility, which is moving people around cities in unmanned aircraft and little pods. So we have to scale up. We have so much further to go. And the first thing that we have to do as members of this community is to scale up ourselves, knowing what we don't know and getting out there and learning about it, to make it a practice like yoga or law or medicine or whatever, mindfulness, whatever it is that you practice. It's a practice. It's also what we call the safety culture. Building the safety culture is an individual act and a community act. It's getting together and understanding that this is not just about us. Flying is about being part of a much larger system. Flying a drone, being in the airspace, is being part of the aviation system. And this is sometimes hard to teach people who aren't really aviators. When I went to flight school, I knew I was making a career change. I loved aviation and I knew it was a big deal. I knew that I was getting into a very structured system and that I'd be operating with a great sense of responsibility and trust as being part of that system. But many drone pilots are not drone pilots because they love aviation. They're drone pilots because drones are a tool and they're a great tool, but they're a tool to do something else that you love or that you want to do, like making films or taking pictures or just having fun. So it's a little bit harder to build the safety culture this way. And that's what I want to try to inspire you to do today, to learn everything about yourself as a pilot, what your interests are, what your capabilities are, what the rules are and how the system works, what our responsibilities are, and spread that, make it go viral, put peer pressure on, get talking to people. Because once we have a strong safety culture in place, and once that safety culture is generally acknowledged, only then do we have public acceptance. And when we have public acceptance, that is when this industry will really take off. There are still naysayers out there who are afraid of drones, who don't understand them. It's not like driving a car where you see a car and you know it's going to stay in that lane and it's going to turn left or right or stop at that sign. With drones, people don't understand them. What are they doing? Where are they going to go? And how are they going to get there? What does that sound? Is that normal? Is it going to fall on my head? We haven't yet earned the trust of the public. And we take that trust very seriously. We try to write regulations that make sense and further the industry. And we try to educate people. And that's why I'm here today. And I got to say, the FAA doesn't always do a great job of it. There's a lot of information out there and it's sometimes hard to digest. Sometimes we don't communicate very clearly because aviation is a totally different world. There's even a different language. There's a lot of new words and things that don't translate into other aspects of our life. And we understand that. And so I invite you to contact us, bring us into your community, call us and talk to a real person. Of course, you can go to our website at any time at faa.gov/UAS, and we have a lot of good information in there. But we have actual people on my staff who answer the phone at the phone number there and respond to emails at that email to you and your individual questions. You can call us up and say, hey, I want to go fly in my backyard, but I'm not sure what airspace it is. Can you help me determine what authorizations, if any, I need? Or I have this idea for something kind of complex. I'm not really sure where to get started. What do I do? Who do I talk to? call us. We can talk to you about your questions, about your personal situation. We can answer general situations. Let us know what you're thinking. We come out, we try to educate, but we also want to learn. We want to hear from you. So these kinds of dialogues are what help us all move together and build that safety culture together and build that trust together. And by all means, if you do nothing else, if you don't call us, you don't email us, you don't go to our website, please register your drone. Not only is it required, but registration is a way for you to get some really basic safety information from the FAA. You'll get very rare but very important FAA safety messages. Register your drone at the drone zone. When you register, you build in a little bit of accountability. It ensures and it communicates to the world that you're taking responsibility as being part of our safety culture. It creates that trust. Thank you so much for having me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful conference. I really wish I could be out there with you in Arizona. I wish I could see all the films that you guys are screening, and I wish the best of luck to everybody who's taking part in a film contest. I really encourage you to please keep in touch with us on the FAA. Talk to each other. Learn everything there is to know, because that's a challenge that you can never quite meet. And I like that. There's always something more to learn. There's a better technique or a best practice or a new piece of equipment or a new feature. There's always something more to learn. And that's what I love about aviation. You never stop learning. And because drones are here for good, there's no reason not to start right now. Thank you, and we hope to hear from you soon.